There is a big update on a story we have been reporting on for months. Newly unsealed FBI documents reveal North Carolina Senator Richard Burr made a flurry of phone calls in early 2020, just as the pandemic hit. And right around that time, he, his wife, and his brother sold hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of stocks. And guess what happened next? The market plunged. Burr was never charged with insider trading, despite that mountain of evidence. And some members of Congress, like our next guest, are fed up, and they're trying to do something about it. For more, I want to bring in Virginia Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger. She has led the charge on a stock trading ban on members of Congress. And our question tonight, Congresswoman, is when is it going to happen? This is a horrible story, right? If I had the kind of information Senator Burr had, and suddenly I sold all sorts of stock and profited off of it, I would be in huge trouble right now. But he's not. And it's totally legal. Does this new story push any of your fellow members of Congress to say we finally need to do something here?
I sure hope so. And in fact, you know, it was early reports related to Senator Burr and a number of other senators, as well as House members. It was the original stories in the press about sales that they have made and purchases that they had made, you know, of course, without these FBI details, back in 2020 that ultimately led me to draft this legislation, bipartisan legislation. I co-lead it with Congressman Ruhle from Texas. And we were on the House floor and we were talking about these reports in the media about people buying and selling various stocks and kind of with exasperation saying, you know, how are you focused on your stock portfolio at the time when, you know, we knew we were headed towards potential, you know, catastrophe of an impending pandemic, the likes of which, you know, we just didn't know how bad it would be. And so that's actually the original genesis of this legislation, the Trust in Congress Act, is regardless of the outcomes, regardless of the intent, this was our thought back in 2020, the American people should never doubt that when we're getting a classified briefing about a virus kind of percolating on the other side of the world and what it might mean for us here in the United States, the American people should never consider or worry that we might be using that information to benefit ourselves. And so that's why we wrote this legislation again back in 2020.
It's legal to be sleazy, especially in this case for members of Congress. She wrote this legislation in 2020. Nancy Pelosi has had months and months and months to bring this thing to the floor. September 30th, that's when you all go on recess. You got a little over 2 weeks. Is there any chance Speaker Pelosi brings this thing to a vote? You can't blame Republicans on this one.
Our legislation, that's right. Our legislation at this point has 67 co-sponsors, Democrats and Republicans across the ideological spectrum. What I can tell you is this. If the Speaker wanted to bring it for a vote this week or this month, she certainly could. And so we've seen kind of stall tactics along the way. There was going to be a committee hearing. There was going to be additional legislation introduced. We haven't seen that. The House Administration Committee was going to take action. We haven't seen that. From my perspective, as someone who truly believes that this legislation is important, because everywhere I go across my district, people are hungry for change. They want to see lawmakers willing to put them first in a demonstrable way. This isn't going to solve all the challenges our nation faces in a day, certainly not. But taking one action to say, when I'm in a briefing about the fact that Russia may invade Ukraine, when I'm in a briefing about some pandemic on the other side of the world, I am thinking about you. I am thinking about what this means for my job as your representative, and not anywhere in my mind am I considering about, you know, the call I might make to a stockbroker. It's very straightforward. There are many industries, many places, many journalists who, in fact, can't buy or sell individual stocks because of the potential conflict of interest, depending upon the subject matter that they cover. Our counterparts in the executive branch over at the White House, they have significant limitations put on their financial holdings. It is straightforward, and it is a step in the right direction that we can take in the realm of ethics reform to demonstrate affirmatively to the American people that we are thinking of them and that we are not that we are not putting ourselves or our financial interests ahead of the American people. It's straightforward legislation that we should be bringing for a vote.
I hear you. I see you. I agree with you. There's a GOP representative, Chris Jacobs, violated the stock trading laws, the current ones, for a second time. But here's the thing. Unless you get your stock trading ban passed and real consequences on the table, is there anything that's going to change lawmakers' behavior? Because the money you can make is huge and the current punishment is teeny tiny.
That's right. And it is a, when the Stock Act was put in place, it was a tremendous step forward, but it's not far enough. And right now we're seeing some of the weaknesses in the current system, to include the fact that when there are delays, when people file late, it's a slap on the wrist. Well, I have a way to solve that problem. We don't have to worry about people filing their paperwork too late or not having a full disclosure. When you can't buy or sell individual stocks, you don't have to worry about the timeliness of your periodic transaction filing. It's a pretty straightforward way to solve that problem as well. But the seriousness of the problem, the fact that there is just news story after news story of kind of inappropriate action or misdeeds or even just late filings, and every time there is a story about this, it just erodes a bit of trust that the American people have in their members of Congress. And frankly, at this juncture in our country's history, any step forward we can be taking to say that we are working for you, not our stock portfolio, is so vitally important. It's why we have people across the ideological gamut, across the geographic scope of our nation, supporting this legislation. It's why I just worked with some of my colleagues to lead a letter last week calling for there to be a vote on legislation that would ban members of Congress, their spouses, and their dependent children from being able to sell individual stocks if they choose to have mutual funds or a blind trust. That's an acceptable way to make sure that they are not in the day-to-day process of making money when they should be serving the people. The focus on this, frankly, the bipartisan support for this legislation is tremendous. And it's something that I think people should be on the record for. And we need to bring it to the floor, and I continue to agitate for that to happen.
But unless Speaker Pelosi brings it to the floor, nothing's going to happen yet. And she is welcome to join us any night on TV and explain why that has not happened yet. Congresswoman, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it.